The cold does not announce itself. It does not warn you. It does not negotiate. When the sun disappears behind these mountains, temperatures can plunge below -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and the land becomes something else entirely, something that tests whether you deserve to be here. Most people think survival is about strength, about fighting, about enduring. They are wrong. The people who lived here, for thousands of years, through winters that would kill a modern man in hours, they did not fight the cold. They read it. They listened to the shape of the stone, the direction of the wind, the angle of the winter sun. The land does not forgive ignorance, but it rewards those who listen. 3 techniques, 3 layers of ancient intelligence: shelter, warmth, and food, hidden where no storm could ever reach it. What did they know that we have forgotten? Stay with us, because by the end of this, the way you see winter, and survival itself, will never be the same. Look at this rock face, not with modern eyes, not with the eyes of someone who has never been truly cold, who has never felt the specific, personal cruelty of wind that finds every gap in your clothing and stays there. Look at it the way a person looks at something they need to survive. To most people passing through these mountains, this overhang is scenery, background, a geological accident with no particular meaning. But to the people who lived and died in these canyons for thousands of years, this rock face was never just stone, it was a conversation. And they had learned, across generations of loss and survival, exactly how to answer it. The land does not speak in words. It speaks in temperature, in shadow, in the angle of afternoon light against a canyon wall. And the people who listened, who truly listened, they lived. Here is what they read in the stone that we no longer know how to see. A south-facing alcove, in these latitudes, receives direct winter sunlight at an angle of roughly 25 to 30 degrees above the horizon during the coldest months of the year. That number means something. That angle means hours. Precious, irreplaceable hours of solar energy absorbed directly into the rock face throughout the day. Sandstone and granite store thermal energy at nearly 3 times the rate of timber. By the time the sun drops and the temperature begins its violent plunge, this rock is not cold. It is alive with stored heat, radiating it slowly, steadily, silently back into the space in front of it. A natural furnace, built by no human hand, waiting for the people who knew where to look. But choosing the right stone was only the first decision. And in a winter that could kill you in 3 hours of exposure, every decision after that carried the same weight. A windbreak came next. Not tall, not dramatic, low, tight, woven from willow branches with the kind of patience that only comes from understanding exactly what you are fighting. Wind across the open plains can move at 40 miles per hour and carry cold that strips heat from exposed skin in minutes. Through a well-constructed brush windbreak, that same wind arrives as something almost gentle, redirected, disarmed. Not by force, but by geometry. The fire was never placed at the center of the shelter. This is the detail that surprises people most, and it should not surprise anyone who has thought carefully about heat. The fire was placed near the back wall, close to the stone, deliberately, always, because fire at the center heats the air. Fire against stone heats the stone. And heated stone does something that heated air cannot do. It holds. It remembers. It gives that warmth back slowly through the night, long after the flames have dropped to coals, long after the fuel runs low, long after the wind outside has reached its cruelest hour before dawn. And then there is the ground. This is where most people, even experienced people, make the mistake that costs them everything. On a night when air temperature drops to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, bare ground will pull heat from a human body at a rate up to 25 times faster than the cold air above it. 25 times. You could be lying in a relatively sheltered space, wind blocked, fire nearby, and still lose core body temperature fast enough to become dangerous within hours, simply because of what is beneath you. The people who survived knew this with the certainty of people who had watched others die from not knowing it. Thick layers of dry grass came first, not loosely scattered but deliberately packed, creating a mattress of trapped air between the cold earth and the human body above. Animal hides followed, adding insulation and wind resistance at the edges. The sleeping surface was not comfort. It was engineering, silent, unglamorous, life-saving engineering that required no tools except knowledge and the willingness to act on it. Children and elders were placed at the center of the sleeping arrangement, always, not by accident, not by tradition for tradition's sake, by design. The people with the least physical resilience and the most irreplaceable value were surrounded on all sides by the warmth of bodies and the protection of those strong enough to absorb the cold at the edges. Warmth here was not a feeling. It was a decision about who mattered most. And that decision was made before the first night of winter, and remade every night after. One night in a rock shelter, with a good fire and a careful windbreak, was survivable. 2 nights. 3. But these winters did not last 3 nights. They lasted months. They buried the ground under feet of snow. They froze rivers solid enough to walk across. They came back, year after year, with no mercy and no memory of the people who had survived them before. A rock overhang is a brilliant solution for a single night. What do you build when the storm doesn't stop, and the 10th morning looks exactly like the first? There is a kind of cold that goes beyond discomfort, beyond pain, beyond the shivering that your body uses to fight back. There is a cold that arrives quietly, somewhere around -30 degrees Fahrenheit, that simply begins to shut things down. Thinking slows. Decisions become impossible. The body starts making choices you did not authorize, pulling blood away from the hands, the feet, the face, protecting the core at the cost of everything else. This is the cold that these people faced. Not occasionally, not in rare extreme events. Every single winter. And they did not merely endure it, they built something that made it irrelevant, the Earth Lodge. To call it a shelter feels inadequate. A shelter is something you find, something temporary, something that keeps the worst out until conditions improve. The Earth Lodge was not that. Archaeological evidence from sites across the northern plains, including excavations at villages associated with the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Pawnee peoples, indicates these structures served as permanent winter residences, some continuously occupied and maintained for decades at a time. This was not survival architecture. This was civilization architecture. A single lodge could span 30 to 40 feet across its interior diameter. Inside that space, 30 to 40 people would live through winter together, sleeping, eating, telling stories, raising children, tending to elders, alongside their most vulnerable animals, whose shared body heat contributed to the warmth of the whole. The structure did not just house a family, it housed a community's collective decision to endure. They did not build walls against winter, they built a world inside it. The building sequence was precise and deliberate, refined across generations into something approaching ritual. Cottonwood posts were selected first, chosen for structural strength and availability along the river terraces, where these communities settled. These posts formed the primary skeleton, driven deep into the earth, angled slightly inward to support the load above. Across them, willow branches were laid in overlapping layers, creating a curved lattice, flexible enough to distribute weight, dense enough to hold what was coming next. Then came the earth itself, sod cut from the surrounding ground, grass harvested and packed into the gaps. Layer after layer of compacted soil built up over the wooden skeleton until the walls reached 2 to 3 feet of solid thickness on every side. Walls with an insulation value comparable to several inches of commercial insulation material, achieved with nothing but ground and human labor. But the entrance is where the true genius reveals itself. Not a doorway, a tunnel, extending outward from the main structure for 10, sometimes 15 feet, low-ceilinged, narrow, forcing anyone who entered to move slowly through a compressed passage before reaching the interior. Cold air is dense. It sinks, pools, moves low and heavy along the ground. A long entrance tunnel exploits this directly. Cold air entering loses energy with every foot it travels, so that by the time it reaches the living space, its killing edge has been blunted by geometry alone. At the apex of the structure, a single smoke hole opened to the sky, the lodge's lungs, drawing fresh air in as smoke rose out, maintaining breathable conditions even during days of continuous fire. Its diameter could be adjusted with a piece of hide, balancing ventilation against heat retention with a precision that understood fluid dynamics in a language older than any written science. And here is the number that matters. Inside a well-constructed earth lodge, during winters when outside temperatures dropped to -30, -40 degrees Fahrenheit, interior temperatures could remain between 50 and 60 degrees, sustained, without electricity, without synthetic insulation. without anything that did not come from the ground beneath their feet. That is not primitive survival. That is engineering so perfectly adapted to its environment that it requires no improvement. It simply works. In the evenings, the elders sat closest to the fire, not merely as a matter of honor, but because the elders were the ones who remembered, who carried in their minds the accumulated survival intelligence of every winter the community had ever faced. Keeping them warm was not sentiment, it was strategy. The community had made a collective decision that the most valuable thing they possessed was not food, not shelter, not fire. It was memory, and around that fire, memory moved, from elder to child. Stories that sounded like legend but functioned like instruction manuals. Descriptions of winters past that were really warnings about winters yet to come. The Earth Lodge kept their bodies warm through the night. The stories told inside it kept their people alive through the centuries. Outside, the blizzard continued. The wind moved over the roof and found nothing to grip. The packed earth absorbed the sound, absorbed the cold, held everything inside steady and still and survivable. Inside, a child fell asleep warm. That child would remember this winter, would someday build their own lodge, a little better perhaps for having grown up inside this one, and would sit their own children close to their own fire and say the things that needed to be said before the next storm came. This is how knowledge survives what weather cannot kill. Not written down, not archived. Passed hand to hand, fire to fire, winter to winter. The lodge is warm, the fire is bright, the walls are holding, but warmth is only half of winter. What happens when the hunting fails? When the snow does not break? When 3 weeks pass and there is still nothing moving outside? And the question is no longer how to stay warm, but whether there is anything left to eat. Imagine this. It is the 3rd week of a blizzard. The snow outside is 4 feet deep and still falling. The animals you would normally hunt have vanished, moved south, buried under drifts, impossible to track. Your fire is burning. Your lodge is holding, but your hands are empty. This is the moment that separated the people who endured from the people who did not. And the answer was already beneath your feet, long before the first snow fell, weeks, sometimes months before. These communities had made a decision that most people today would never think to make. They had hidden their survival underground, deliberately, precisely, in a location known only to those who needed to know, the cache pit. Archaeological excavations across the Great Plains have uncovered hundreds of these storage structures, some dating back over 1,000 years. What they reveal is not primitive food storage. What they reveal is a sophisticated understanding of soil thermodynamics that took modern refrigeration science centuries to rediscover. The design was intentional down to its shape. A bell-shaped pit, narrow at the mouth, wide at the belly, was not an accident of construction. The narrow opening minimized the surface area exposed to temperature fluctuation when opened. The wide interior maximized storage volume while maintaining stable conditions throughout. It was also, notably, extremely difficult for animals to excavate from above. The physics worked in every direction simultaneously. Depth mattered precisely. At 4 to 6 feet below the surface, ground temperature across much of the Great Plains stabilizes at approximately 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, year-round. Not freezing, not warm. Exactly the range that preserves dried corn, beans, and smoked meat without spoilage for months at a time. The interior was lined with dry grass and animal hide, moisture barriers placed with care, because a single wet season of stored corn could mean the difference between spring and starvation. A tight wooden lid sealed the mouth. Earth was packed above it, and then, winter itself became the final layer of protection. Snow drifted naturally over the site, erasing every visible trace. What the storm tried to destroy, the earth quietly protected. But here is what the archaeology cannot fully capture. The discipline required to maintain a cache pit through a long winter was not a physical skill, it was a moral one. When hunger pressed hardest, when children were crying and the fire was burning low, the rule never changed. Open the pit carefully, take only what is needed, reseal it immediately, because one careless moment, one extra handful taken in desperation, could compromise the entire store, could cost lives not today, but in 3 weeks, when the storm finally broke and there was nothing left. That restraint, that ability to think beyond the present moment of suffering, may be the most sophisticated survival technology these people ever developed. It was not stored in a pit. It was stored in the culture itself. Food keeps the body alive. Warmth keeps the night at bay. But neither of these, alone, explains how these people did not merely survive winter. They carried their entire civilization through it, generation after generation, without losing a single story. When everything outside is trying to kill you, fire is not comfort. Fire is civilization. Not because of its heat, though the heat matters. Not because of its light, though darkness in a winter lodge without flame is a different kind of cold entirely. But because of what happens in the space around it. Anthropological research across multiple indigenous cultures of North America suggests a pattern that appears consistently. Communities with higher rates of intergenerational knowledge sharing demonstrated measurably stronger survival outcomes through severe winters. The fire was not incidental to this. The fire was the mechanism. It created the one condition that made knowledge transfer possible. Stillness. Forced stillness. A whole community, unable to move, unable to hunt, unable to build, gathered in one warm place with nothing to do but listen. Every story told beside a winter fire was a survival manual in disguise. An elder describing how her grandmother found water beneath the ice was not telling a story. She was delivering a field technique to 12 people who would need it within the next decade. A father recounting the winter his family nearly starved, and what saved them, was not reminiscing. He was issuing a warning to children young enough to still remember it when it mattered. This is what the cache pit, the earth lodge, and the rock overhang all share beneath their differences. They are not separate technologies. They are chapters in a single philosophy, one that understood survival not as an individual act of strength, but as a collective act of memory. The Apache said it plainly. We are the Apache, and we will remain. Not a boast, not defiance for its own sake, a statement of technical confidence. We have built the right structures. We have stored the right food. We have told the right stories to the right children. We will remain, because we have already done the work that remaining requires. By morning, frost still covers everything outside. The world is white and silent and indifferent. But inside the lodge, a child is waking up warm. An elder is already tending the coals. Someone is quietly checking that the cache pit was properly sealed last night. No drama, no heroics. Just the steady, practiced, ancient rhythm of people who know exactly what they are doing and why. That knowledge did not come from a book. It came from 10,000 winters of paying attention. And here is the question that stays with me, that I think should stay with all of us. We have insulated walls and electric heat and grocery stores that never close. We have solved the physical problem of winter completely. But have we kept the thing that mattered most? The stories, the discipline, the understanding that what we do today determines whether the people we love will be warm 3 weeks from now. The rocks have not changed. The cold has not changed. Only we have. Remember where this knowledge came from, and remember who kept it alive.